Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer Sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for our 36th edition of the 1950s Fun Chat. And we have had so many wonderful guests from throughout the country who have shared their memories of the 1950s, and we are looking forward to hearing from this gentleman today as well. Jackie, do you have some housekeeping to attend to?
I do. I would like to encourage our visitors to peruse the screen in front of them. First of all, notice the banner below. It is our website, www.whilethewindmillwatch.com. And there you can find all sorts of information about the book, about us, about the Fun Chat. And speaking of the Fun Chat, you can see all of the ones that we previously recorded. Okay, then keep on looking, and in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see this beautiful book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. And note that it has a beautiful North Dakota sunset on the front, which wraps around to the back. And you will also note in the lower right-hand corner, right below those silhouette of those little girls, there's a little white medallion, and that says 2022 Independent Press Award in the category of regional as a distinguished favorite. This was bestowed upon our book about a month ago, and we are so pleased that it's there. So anything else, Janine, before we introduce our guest?
Well, also all the Fun Chats can be seen on our website at whilethewindmillwatch.com too. So if you don't want to go to our YouTube channel page, you can catch them on our website that you see scrolling at the bottom of the stream. Let's introduce our guest, Jackie.
Okay. Around North Dakota, the Bitz, B-I-T-Z name is a household name. Along with George and his brothers Vincent and Pius, Bitz Auction Service is well recognized throughout the Flickertail state. Born on September 29th of 1936, George Bitz is not a stranger to the state or to good old-fashioned hard work. His self-taught, simple, and straightforward auctioneer's chant is rhythmic and hypnotic. Born in Napoleon, North Dakota, George's family owns the Napoleon Livestock Auction. At 86 years of age, he still cries that weekly livestock sales. But of course, he's not limited to selling just livestock. He has a variety of experiences in his pocket with other sales. Now, George has accumulated a lifetime of stories about living on the prairie in North Dakota, and we will be soon privileged to hear a few of them. So, George, welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. We're really glad you're here with us.
Hi, George. Thank you for joining us today.
George.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. George, you have enjoyed a lifelong auctioneering career. Would you please tell us how you became interested in this profession?
How long?
It's been a lifelong occupation for you. When did you start auctioneering, and how did you become, why did you want to go into that profession?
Well, I went to the sale with my dad when I was about 11, 12 years old. And I was really fascinated by this auctioneer that they had. He was selling horses. And then I went home and I started chanting to myself, for I don't know how many years. And I got a job at Wish Livestock. And I worked there, and I asked the boss if I could sell a few horses, and he said I can't at the horse sale. So I did. And after he heard me sell the horses, he said, "Hey, I'm going to hire you here." And he gave me a job. And
Wonderful.
and
Terrific.
I worked there for I don't know how many years. I think for about 19 years. And then I got a job at other sale barns, and the Lord has blessed me. There was a time when I used to, for about 7, 8 years, I sold 6 sales a week. I
Oh
went
my
to a
goodness.
sale every day of the week, Monday through Saturday. And
Yes.
then, so the Lord has blessed me.
He does, doesn't he? And did you drive there in a car, in a pickup to each one of those sales, or did you ever face any inclement weather on those sale days?
A lot of inclement weather, but sometimes I had the pickup, sometimes I had the car.
Oh,
And I just enjoyed every day. But there was, you know how it is in North Dakota, you have a lot of bad weather. So there was
mhm,
a lot of times when there was a storm, I stayed overnight, at the sale barn or
mhm.
wherever, and when the wind let up, I drove home.
Okay. Well, when you were going to all these different sales, and that your major form of employment, or were you farming, or did you have a cow herd at that same time?
I had a cow herd for quite a while, but then I finally gave that up because it was really hard to calf out a bunch of cows when you're gone every day.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So then I just got some yearlings.
Yes. Well, still kept your hands in the beef market. That's great. That's
Mhm.
that's great.
When you think of the weather, George, do you think of one or two outstanding, maybe horrific experiences that come to your mind?
Well,
Or there are too
there was
many?
would be a lot of them.
Okay. All right. So we've touched on your career. Now let's go back a few years and tell us about your life as a child, please. Maybe your family life, your church life, your education.
Well, I come from a family of 11. My parents had 11 of us children. And so I quit school when I was 12 years old and stayed home and cleaned barns and milked cows and hauled hay. And,
Hmm.
my parents had everything: sheep, pigs, chickens, horses, cattle, goats. We had about everything.
Huh.
Hmm.
And
Huh.
And did you milk cows too?
we milked cows. We milked 21 cows. That's all the room we had in the barn. So we
Ah,
milked 20 by hand. We milked
Uh,
by hand 21 cows. That's what we had room in the barn. And my dad usually had 21 milk cows.
was
Mm-hmm. So
was
how
that
many you were milking? You
Pardon
and
me?
your brothers? Who did the
Oh, yeah.
milk?
My mom, dad milked, and my brothers and sisters. And yeah, we, everybody, I can't remember when we were kids, when we were too young to work. I mean, when you were 6, 7 years old, our whole family,
sure?
everybody, hey, you had to pitch in, feed the calves or feed the
Mhm.
chickens or whatever.
Yes.
That's right.
Did you sell that cream in at a creamery, or did you pretty much, with your size family you had, did you pretty much use all that yourself? The
No,
cream and milk.
we sold the cream at Napoleon.
Okay. Hmm. And how
We
far was your farm from Napoleon?
13 miles, and
Okay.
Hmm.
we usually milk 21 cows, and we had enough cream that I usually bought the groceries.
Uh-huh.
Sure.
Maybe those days my parents would go to town, and if they sold cream for like 35, $40, my mom would buy the groceries with that.
Hmm.
Of course, groceries were a lot cheaper, and
Hmm.
and but Dad always bought the groceries.
Oh, that's good.
Now, did you go to country school, or did you go to school in Napoleon?
No, we just had a the school was a half a mile from our place,
Okay.
and
And did you
so
ride a pony?
south of Napoleon, yeah, 13 miles south. And I started school when I was 4.
Uh-huh.
and I got out of school when I was 8, out of the 8th grade. I
Okay.
mean 12.
Yes,
And
yes. Well, George, I think you and Jackie and I share a similar teacher
yes,
in
we did.
our elementary background. Tell us who she was.
Mrs. Violet Arnst, and she was such a wonderful lady. She taught our school, and she was my teacher for about 3 years, and she was such a wonderful lady. I had so many nice teachers in them 8th grades. I had wonderful teachers,
Uh-huh.
and Mrs. Arnst was one of them. She was such a nice lady. I miss her.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you remember most about her as a teacher?
Well, she was just so kind. She'd come to school in the morning, and she'd read to us, and she'd say a prayer.
Oh,
She was such a nice Christian lady.
uh-huh.
And so one night, my brother and I were eating in Bismarck at one of the local restaurants. And then I said to my brother Vince, and I hadn't seen her for years, maybe 20 some years. And I said to Vince, "That's Mrs. Violet Arnst over there." And he said, "I'll go over and ask her." And he went over and he said, "You know that guy there?" She said, "Yeah, that's George." And
Neat.
I went over and shook her hand, and she started crying.
Oh,
Oh,
She said, "You were such a good student." And I said, "Mrs. Arnst, you were such a wonderful teacher." And she
yes.
just sat there and cried. She was
Yes.
so kind. She was such a kind lady. You had her for a teacher, so you know what I'm talking about.
Oh,
exactly.
yeah. And
Yeah,
she was always so immaculately dressed. Now, did she wear dresses and high heels and jewelry when she was teaching at your school?
No, she
oh,
wore a dress, but
I bet she did.
she did not well jewelry. She was such a
Oh,
humble, kind lady.
okay. Did you start how did you start the school day? Do you remember that when you were 4 years old?
Well, in the morning when she came to school, first thing she went up there, after she rang the bell, and she'd read a little story to us, and then we were told to get to work, and so she was nice, and she taught
Was
me
there, was there a piano at your school?
piano.
Yes.
No,
Oh,
no.
well,
All we just had a one-room schoolhouse, and it was cold in the wintertime. Oh, was that cold? Just about froze to death because, a little cold stove, and well, it took a long time to warm that school.
Mhm.
yes, yes.
And that was all 8th grades or 9 grades in that school?
All 8th grades in the school.
Okay, sure, sure. Well, and I imagine Mrs. Arntz was responsible for starting that fire and making sure that it was out at the end of the school day?
When she came in the morning, she would be the one that would fire up the stove,
Mm-hmm.
and she would have some coal and a little bit of wood and a little bit of paper and start the fire. And by the time it got warm, was close to dinner time because it would take forever.
What do,
And
what do you remember about wintertime games during recess?
well, we had such few students in our school, so we would just go out and play tag. That was about it because
Mhm.
we only had about 7, 8 kids
Oh,
in school. We did not have a lot of students. We only had about 7 or 8, and so we'd go out and play tag or fox and goose and stuff like that.
Yes, yes. I bet there are a lot of people out there who are listening to this or watching this that recall the game of fox and goose. I don't think it's played very much anymore, but we sure had fun playing it too.
Yeah, right, right, right. We played that, and it we didn't really in school when there's only 7, 8 kids, and 2 were my sisters, so
oh,
there was only like 5 other kids A lot of times only four. So there wasn't a lot of games you could play. You could play, we could never play baseball or basketball or anything like that, because we didn't have enough students.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Did you
So,
did you sh- oh, did you shoot marbles or did you throw snowballs in the wintertime?
We always walked. It was,
Okay.
is that what you're saying? Yeah, it was a half a mile. We always walked.
Okay.
We did not get a ride. No.
Did
okay.
did you
Half
did you
a
throw
mile?
snowballs at each other?
Not really.
Ah, oh,
We
you
So,
were kids.
When we were
yeah.
done milking in the morning, we went to eat breakfast and then changed clothes and walked a half a mile to school.
Sure.
And
Okay.
then when it was over, I we walked home a half a mile. And I had a pigeon that I took as a little pigeon, and I trained it, and it would follow me to school,
Oh,
Oh.
cool.
all the way to school.
Uh-huh.
Would fly, just fly from one post to the next and follow me, and sometimes sat on my head and walked to school. And then when school was over, of course, I'd go home. And it was such a nice pigeon. And one day the cat got it. So
Oh,
I
that's
was so depressed I just about cried.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it was such a nice pigeon. When I walked to school, it would follow me from
Huh?
one post to the next. And a lot of times it would come over and land right on my head.
Hmm.
And that went on for like one winter. And one day I went in the barn to milk the cows. The pigeon followed me in there, and the cat got her.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet you were just so sad.
Well,
Yeah.
I was so mad at that cat. I could.
Yeah.
So, George, you had such a large family. Does that mean that you had a lot of people to play games with, cards or any other kind of games?
We did
That's
not play
full.
cards. We did
You did
not play
not.
cards. So many people, when we go to the sale barn now, a lot of cattle buyers used to play cards, and they asked me to play cards. We never played cards. I didn't know how to play cards. To
Ah,
this day, I have, but we did play checkers now and then.
Oh, sure, sure. Did
Not,
you ever did you ever play the game of crokinole?
no, we did not.
oh,
Okay. We had that at Minokan School, and that
Sure.
was in addition to
Yeah.
checkers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and marbles.
Yep.
That was a way nice. You had a way nicer school than we did.
Thank
Probably.
Yeah.
you. We had a few more students at least.
Our our school was not that great. It was old, and
Yeah.
you know, so
So, George, let's change the topic a bit. And how about let's go to the cattle business, something with which you are familiar. Can you just in a few words think about how, from the 1950s to your present day, how has that changed, the cattle business?
oh, it's
Or to,
unbelievable. It is. It's the cattle business nowadays is so good compared to then, because those days the cattle are so much bigger and better quality than they
Mhm.
were those days. I mean, nowadays we have so many nice cattle come to the sale now, and nowadays you have cattle that weigh, a year old and weigh 1,000 pounds.
Mhm.
Well, in the 1950s, them cattle that were a year old maybe weighed 650, 700 pounds.
Mhm.
It's just there's just a lot of nice cattle nowadays, and they're a lot bigger and better. And when we like in the 1950s, about all we had for feed, we had some oats,
Mhm.
and then we had foxtails and hay needles. Where
Oh,
nowadays you have corn and silage,
Mhm.
and the cattle nowadays get such good feed that the performance is so good nowadays. But like I've always said, when you look back, I tell my children, when I look back in the 50s, the feed was so, you didn't have a lot of grain, and it's much better nowadays. And of course, the cattle bring those days, the cattle didn't bring much money. You probably kept the calf from spring until fall and got $100 a head. Well, now, you have cattle the same way, and them kind of cattle bring 12, 1300. And so the cattle have it really good nowadays. We people do too. We eat good too. But the cattle eat really good.
Yes.
George, maybe some people have never heard the chant of an auctioneer. Would you please sell a 3-year-old mare who has been green broke? And right now, just pretend that mare is in your sales ring.
Well, I'm gonna sell like the cattle would sell maybe tomorrow. If a good load of steers comes in and weighs 700 pounds,
okay,
you probably say $140 on that one, now two, now three, now four, give $1.45, now seven and a half, 50, now one, now half, 52, now half, three, now half, now four, give a half, five, 55, now five, now five, sold, 154.50.
Thank you. That's fun.
I just love that. I used to go to 6 sales a week, and every day was a picnic.
Oh, that is wonderful that you are so in love with that profession. You were born for that, George.
I did, yes. The first time I heard that auctioneer, when my dad took me along to the sale when I was about 11, 12 years old, I just prayed to the Lord, help me that I could do that. And the good Lord was good to me. He answered my prayer.
And you were thanking him every day. You start chanting.
I still like to sell the sale now. I go to Napoleon every Thursday morning, and that's the only sale I go to. Is
And you've cried sales other than livestock. Is that correct?
Did it what?
Have you sold other? Have you been the auctioneer at sales other than livestock sales? Have you been the auctioneer for household sales or estate sales or machinery sales?
We did that too. We sold a lot of farm sales. Yeah.
Okay. And you were. Are you still involved with your brothers in Bitz auction service?
Right. Yeah. But
and tell us about that business.
Well,
when did you start that?
That has changed so much. It's unbelievable. Some of our first sales, one of the first farm sales that I had with my partner, Gordy Ulmer, he told me, George, it was in the winter, March 15th, be sure and dress well. It's going to be cold. Well, he said, it's a big sale. Those days we sold the chickens, the cows, the farm machinery, the furniture, the hay, oats, and the sale was $17,000.
Oh,
well, nowadays, that was like in 1962, maybe, or somewhere in there. I don't know exactly which day, but nowadays you have these sales, and a lot of these sales are anywhere from $1 million to from $1 million to $2 million. I mean, it's just unbelievable. You sell a tractor for $250,000, or you sell a combine for $250,000, and a lot of them bring a lot more than that. But I mean, it's changed so much. And when we had that sale that time, like March 15th, it was a beautiful day. But the next day we had a blizzard, and we had the sale was like $17,000, and that was for everything. The machinery, the hay, the cattle.
That didn't include land, did it?
No.
Okay.
But nowadays, we had a sale a while back, maybe about 5 years ago, maybe a little longer, and we sold the man passed away, and we sold the land, and there was 16,603 acres, and it sold for a little more than 10 million. But today it would be worth a lot more than that.
Yes. Did all that land go to one buyer?
No. We did. It got divided up. I would say it probably went to maybe 10 different people. But
And and does most of that land sell as bare ground, or would there be buildings on sites on them too?
the the buildings were absolutely worthless.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, I mean, there were some buildings on there, but they were all wrecked, old
Mhm,
and all wrecked,
mhm,
and it brought just a shade over 10 million.
mhm,
And the man that owned it, of course, passed away just shortly before that. He
mhm.
had 103 quarters of land,
Wow.
and he
Yeah.
just had it all paid for. Then he died.
Oh, yes. Yes, it's
He got
amazing.
to be close to 80 years old. He was not quite 80,
Mhm.
and I
Okay.
used to visit with him a lot.
Uh-huh.
And he just got the land paid for,
Oh
and he
my.
got sick and died.
Mhm.
Mm.
Well, that's sometimes what farmers do. We work and work and work until our end when
Right.
there is a financial payoff, and we aren't always around to be able to enjoy the rewards. But yet the reward in
Yeah.
that is that we have that lifestyle of
Yeah.
being in farming and being in rural America and growing food for America, and that's kind of part of it. That, at least that's how my husband and I feel in Iowa, where when we farm. It
Well, up here where you were born and raised,
uh-huh.
that time that land was maybe worth $50 an acre. Right now, they sold some land right close to there now, about just a shade over $7,000 an acre,
Sure. Sure. Yes.
right next to it.
Yes,
Things have
it's
really changed.
yes, but sometimes there comes a peak in those prices too. Do you anticipate, or when you were selling in the 50s, and how long did it take for those prices to peak, and then they started going down again?
Well, I don't know. In the 50s, the land started selling better, like in the 60s when the crops got better and the machinery was better. And,
Mhm.
nowadays there's such good equipment out there all over, no matter where you are. The
Yeah.
equipment is so good. When I was a child growing up, we didn't use the tractor in the wintertime. They wouldn't start the tractors. They were old. And well, now, you know, and that's why this land sells so much better, because one man or one family goes out and they farm, 20,000 acres, 30,000 acres. Well, those days, my dad was sort of a big farmer, and we farmed maybe, 1,600 acres, what we had.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that was a lot of, that was a lot to farm those days,
Yeah.
because we had to do most of it with a shovel and a fork, except for the seeding and the plowing and stuff like that. But the rest of the stuff was all, hey, here's a fork, here's a shovel, get to it.
But you had a large workforce in your family who could get that job done,
Yeah.
with your siblings, with your brothers and sisters. So, George, tell us, did you in the 50s, did you have a TV in your home?
Oh yeah. We got a TV in 1953.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
1953.
You were,
We had three ponies, and my dad said, if you want to, we'll sell one pony and we'll buy a television. And we took one pony to the auction sale. We sold it. We got enough money to buy a TV,
Mhm.
but it wasn't very good. I mean, the picture wasn't great, and but it was a lot better than nothing.
did you have to put aluminum foil on the rabbit ears to get reception?
Yeah, we had to do that. Yes, and that
Mhm.
was another pain.
Yeah. And and as children, you probably were the remote, because you didn't have remotes then. You had to get up and change.
We had a remote also.
Oh, you did. Oh, you were pretty
Well, we
fancy.
could we had two channels,
Yes.
and that's all we had. But it
Yes.
it was very good. That's about, winters in North Dakota can be very tough. So a
Yeah.
lot of times got snowed in, so middle of November, and you didn't really get to town much till about the first part of April because the winters were tough
Mhm.
and the cars and were not good, and there was no four-wheel drive pickups. All you had was a two-wheel drive pickup. They'd be stuck right now.
Did you have gravel roads or were they dirt roads?
How you know what?
Did you have gravel roads or
Oh,
dirt roads?
absolutely, yeah. Yep.
Gravel. Mhm.
Gravel roads most of the way, and
Yes.
they
Yes.
were always blocked.
Uh-huh.
So you just made up your mind. Come the middle of November, we'll see you in April.
Well, did the mailman get through?
Yeah, usually did. For some reason, he usually got mail.
Uh-huh.
But,
Uh-huh.
but those days you couldn't get a daily paper, so you got sort of one paper once a week, our local paper. I mean, we did not, you did not have a daily paper that
Mhm.
that you could read. I
Mhm.
mean, you just watch television and watch the news there, and
Mhm.
that's about the only thing. And like I said, we didn't play cards, but we did play checkers. But there was always work to do. It seemed like in the morning you'd get up at 7 o'clock, and you worked all day till about 5:30 was supper time, and so it as a child, and it was really tough growing up as a child because it was all work.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. We can recognize that. Yes, as well.
And
George, we're getting close to the end of our broadcast, but I always ask a guest two questions. In the 1950s, is there a fun memory that comes to mind?
well, yeah, the fond memory was when I got my first job, and that was in the late 50s. I'll never forget the day, when I got my first job, and
Wonderful.
and I was really thankful to my boss because he gave me a break because
Mhm.
I didn't go to auction school, and he hired me and he paid me well.
Good. Good.
And
He
so,
probably noticed you were a man of integrity or a young person of integrity and hard work. And I think that probably spoke very highly for you in getting a job at that young of age and his trust in you.
Mhm.
well, I think I usually told him thank you after every sale, and he sort of
Mhm.
maybe appreciated that too. That
Mhm.
I was thankful I had a job. I mean,
Yeah.
the wages weren't what they are now, but I didn't need that much money either. I was with my mom and dad. I lived there, so whatever, you know, I didn't need really a lot of money.
Okay. Yes. I know that Jackie, tell them about your experience when you asked Dad for an allowance.
Oh, okay. Well,
When I went,
when I was about in the fifth grade, I asked my dad if I could have an allowance, and he said, "What do you need money for? Don't I feed you and clothe you, and you have a good life here?" And so, and he said, "Is well," he said, "You probably don't need an allowance because if you work as you continue to work as you've been doing, there will be nothing you don't need." He said, "We are a family. We work together in the farm. We all have to do pull our weight." And so that kind of satisfied me. I guess he was right. I didn't need any money. I had everything I needed,
that's right,
Yes.
you didn't
including a
really,
job. Many
didn't really.
jobs.
Well, they fed you,
Yes.
your clothing, and
Mhm.
so you didn't need a lot of money.
No.
Mhm. That's
And they
right.
also gave us so much more. They gave us love and they encouraged us. We were able to take music lessons in town. We would once in a while go out to dinner, lunch at a restaurant. That was a real treat. They were very thoughtful and supportive parents.
Right?
Mhm. And
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 we got to know how, and we got to go to church. And
yes.
we were taught that education as well, the Christian education. So that's has carried us through.
Yeah.
And George, what from the 1950s has inspired you all through your adult life?
Well, I had really good parents, and
Mhm.
they were very, very nice to me. I mean, it was hard work, but I had good parents,
Yeah.
and they never hollered or screamed at us or nothing like that. But I mean, it was just the morning. My dad would never call you more than once. He'd call you, it's time to get up, and that was it. And if you didn't get up, but we did. But my aunt and uncle used to come to our place, and they said that the kids just will not get up in the morning. We call them and go out and milk 2 or 3 cows, come back in, and they're still sleeping. And my dad says, "No, I'm going to call them once, and that's it." And that's my dad in the morning would get up. If it was 6 o'clock, 6:30 or 7 when we got up to milk cows, we slept upstairs. And my dad would call up there, it's time to get up. And he went to the barn, and we got up. I don't know what would have happened if we wouldn't have got up. I never took that chance.
Well, thank you, George. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this our guest George Bitz from who grew up in the Napoleon, North Dakota area, now lives in Bismarck, North Dakota, has been our guest today. And for some of you who are familiar with auctioneering and going to sales, many different kinds of sales, and especially livestock sales, you might be familiar with Mr. George Bitz because oftentimes he's known as Mr. North Dakota. He's been so well received with his profession that he loves so much. George, we thank you. Jackie and I thank you for taking the time to be a part of our podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Oh,
This has been a fun chat.
yes, it was. It was. So, folks, next time we will have another guest. But until then, we
Sure.
hope that you think about poodle skirts and cool cars and working hard like George did. And even maybe if you got to go to the malt shop and have a malt, that was even fun too. That was all part of the 1950s.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You're welcome. And I'd like to have you be sure to push that little red subscribe button and the thumbs up button. Click that. And we would like to have you join us next week for this new exciting show. We'll have another guest. So tell your friends and even your relatives about the 1950s Fun Chat.
Yes. And you can learn more about Jackie and me and about our book, our national award-winning book, where you can purchase that book. And you can even go to a tab that has all these different fun chats archived at our website, whilethewindmillwatch.com. We'd love to have you peruse that website. And so that's whilethewindmillwatch.com. So we'll see you next time on the 1950s Fun Chat.
Thank